We don't follow the music. We follow the Hollywood cult.
Right.
Because that's part of general conspiracy lore.
Yeah. Well, your area of interest and kind of a thing that we talk about on this show and your YouTube page.
Oh, it's cults. It's high control group. It's groupthink.
What I always find interesting about what you talk about, even when it's like, a Jonestown straight up like definition of a cult, is seeing some of those techniques and thought patterns reflected in what people would call like movements or social movements that wouldn't necessarily be defined as a cult.
Well, the thing what defines a cult is it's technically a high control group, which is why it goes over a broad spectrum. And really, it just has to have deviant beliefs. So deviant beliefs and practices. Now, of Sean Combs, he definitely has the practices. So a high control group basically means that you are in a group in which all of your actions are tightly controlled. And if you read the charges against P. Diddy, you'll see that he did run a high control group. But is it a cult is another, because that's not how we understand cults.
Right.
And it's kind of more complicated than that, but we'll go into it.
Because we're looking at the allegations. Like we read the whole indictment.
It's a 14-page indictment. We'll go through it.
Yeah.
As is applicable.
But hearing that and then hearing the, obviously it's been years of people coming out as like to expose Diddy, right? Of his parties,
Hollywood, and
all this stuff. And a lot of people sounded crazy until right now.
Yeah, there was a guy who shut up Trump Hotel who said he was a Diddy slave in 2018, I believe. Yeah, and he had a completely crazy. I would have at the time said that was a crazy interrogation.
Right.
But later, all of this stuff, you look back at it and you're like, well, he may have been a Diddy sex slave.
Right. And then reading through the indictment, the 14-page indictment thing, you start to see how this could be considered. See, when I was reading it, I thought, okay, this is, they call it the enterprise. It's kind of what they call it in the indictment, which is Diddy's various businesses bundled together under a thing, and that the purpose of the enterprise and the people who are close to Diddy who work at the enterprise, the goals of the enterprise being to further the interests and interests of the
Diddy.
Figurehead.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like a cult of personality around this guy. They are reliant upon this guy for their income, for their career prospects, for like all these things. They kind of follow him where he goes. So it's kind of like where it seems to be lacking for me a cult status is that, he doesn't have like a doctrine or like a mythos that we know of that's public.
Oh, okay. So I would challenge you on that, which is that his mythos, the Diddy mythos, is so common in this country that it's just not deviant. Because if you look up the Wikipedia definition of a high control group or cult, it says that they're following deviant practices. Because you could define the Catholic Church as a cult. In the 1800s, the Catholic Church in the United States, people were like, this is a cult, get it out of here.
Right.
It was actually quite dangerous to them and their ideology. But what Diddy is selling is materialism, it's money, it's self-interest. And so that is so common to the United States that it's not deviant in 2024. But if you took that same mythology back 200 years, they would say, absolutely, this guy is a cult leader. Because he's not controlling them through the mind. And this is where I would say, maybe not. They're not believing necessarily these ideologies, but they do believe in furthering themselves. So this is where it overlaps with Satanism and do what thy wilt. Even if they don't say, I am a Satanist. So this is why when people say, Hollywood's run by a satanic cult, look at the Diddy allegations, you can't call those people crazy.
We'll go into that because, we argue about that all the time. It's like, I feel like if you're going to call something a satanic cult, there has to be an explicit, like, acknowledgement from the people participating, or at least the people getting the people to participate, where it might get a little murky, that this is a like ritual to a specific deity or thing, right? Where I feel like what you're saying is that a satanic cult is, or not a satanic cult, but a satanic ritual or anything satanic needs to basically just further the values of what you would consider Satanism.
These are satanic values, whether or not he's doing it in front of a statue of Baphomet. And this is where I think this is where the debate comes in, because you could just say, well, that's what America believes. They believe in getting yours. They believe in furthering the self. That is our entire ideology. That's why it's not deviant. Whereas if they'd done the same thing and there was a statue of Baphomet, now we say it's a satanic cult. But for people who are looking in from the outside, especially if you're looking in from another time, you look at this and you see a group of people who are working for Satan, whether they know it or not. They are furthering Satan's values. And I'm saying, I'm not a Satanist myself. I'm not like, trying to say this. I'm just saying that this is how you can look at it. And they believe a satanic cult is running Hollywood. And you can't disprove them.
This is something that, yeah, I would argue constantly with my crazy friend about, because he would call everything satanic. Everything
Yeah.
is satanic. And my impulse is to say, if it's not explicitly satanic, then you calling it satanic is more just an interpretation of the thing.
That's true. I don't disagree.
Your interpretation of the thing, and is it truly, does it deserve the weight of calling it satanic if the participants don't consider it satanic?
Now, first off, we don't know one way or the other whether they do. So
We do not.
Yeah.
That is true. And kind of like what I was saying, what I qualified my first statement about this with is, are the people in charge the ones that need to interpret whatever is happening as satanic? And they're basically tricking people into, because that I feel like is sort of the underlying theme of most of these schizo YouTube videos about satanic Hollywood. Is it like there are certain actors that are actual, like, wear the robes satanic cult members or whatever, and that they're bringing people in to do these acts, and unbeknownst to them, it's a satanic ritual.
Yes.
What would you define as what makes something satanic, and why?
Okay, so I'm just reading from the 9 Satanic Statements from Anton LaVey.
Anton LaVey.
Yes. Number 1, Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence. That is definitely a ritual.
Now, LaVey is sort of he's the fun Satanist, right?
Yeah.
LaVey is always the performative Satanist.
Satan represents all the so-called sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, and emotional gratification. So basically, it is just furthering the self. And it is a cult of the self,
Right.
what Diddy's doing. So I don't think that he has an ideology. I don't think that he is like a cult leader like this. And I think he controls people through resources. And not necessarily that they're under, his mind control. They're captured by his charisma, like he's some Rasputin creature with deep eyes that people just get lost into. And they say this about cult leaders a lot. Like, I was just mesmerized by him. No, I don't think it's that. I think he has a high control group, yes. But it's not like a cult, like they believe in anything except for money and furthering themselves.
Which is a damn shame, because the infrastructure that he had, the influence that he had,
Yeah.
just primed for just throw a doctrine on that.
Yeah,
Make
but
something up.
He seems to be such a self-indulgent narcissist. This is what he seems. I don't know for a fact.
Right.
I'm just saying,
All of this is a legend.
Yeah. I don't know him. Thank God. Thank God I never met Diddy. But no, thank God that he never believed in anything except apparently selling vodka and selling, clothes and albums.
And sex. It seems to all come down to sex.
It does all come down to sex. And that's like an accusation people have accused cult leaders of a long time, is that they're just trying to satisfy their sexual needs. But Diddy seems to do it through power and money, and everyone else seems to do it through hypnotizing people.
And what's really interesting is, he is basically the hip-hop Epstein.
Yes.
Which it seems, this I actually 1,000% believe. Now, let's talk about Epstein for a second, because before, 4 years ago, if you were somebody talking about Epstein, you were an Alex Jones nut job.
Yeah.
Alex Jones has been talking about Epstein for decades.
Yeah.
And turns out he was 100%, well, not 100%. We'll get into that. But he was right. Epstein was basically blackmailing. If you don't know who Epstein is and what he was actually accused of, he was legally accused of what?
I believe it was trafficking minors.
Right. The implication for the reason he was
arrested and then unfortunately unalived himself.
Yeah. In jail. The implication is, and I think it's pretty much generally accepted that what he was doing was bringing powerful people, mainly politicians and business, captains of industry.
Oh yeah, the
to
most
his-
powerful people.
to his private island and getting underage girls and basically throwing, traps for
These
them.
parties,
Little honey pots for them, recorded all of it, and now he's got blackmail on all of these powerful people so that the people who were financing him and the people he worked for could kind of move the levers of power because they have this leverage.
Yeah, and the only real debate on that now is how far did it go? Who was he blackmailing? Because we don't have, that hasn't been released.
Yeah, because he unalived
He unalives himself, so the problem just kind of went away for all
Right.
these very powerful people. And the accusations against Diddy are basically that he's been throwing these freak-offs
Yeah.
for 20 plus years now, maybe 30 years now, and getting blackmail, get these videotapes on these powerful people, these black people
In
in
the music
Hollywood.
industry mainly.
In the music industry, but also politicians,
Yeah.
Hollywood, things like that. Basically, yeah, he's like the Black Epstein.
Yeah.
And it makes you think those people, those conspiracy theorists who have been saying, well, Hollywood's run by a satanic cult, and you can't get in unless you do some sort of ritual. And of course, we're like, oh, that's crazy, that's crazy. But like, what is this if not a ritual?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to call those people crazy. I have to say, remember Alex Jones went to Bohemian Grove?
Yeah.
And all of the elites were worshiping that owl god?
Mm-hmm.
You cannot tell the conspiracy theorists there's nothing going on right now.
Yeah.
You really can't, because why were they all worshiping to the owl god?
And since this has all gone down, a lot of, who knows if it's related, but a lot of CEOs are resigning, like the CEO of Nike resigned. I'm sure there are other examples.
There was a big list.
Yeah.
Should we pull up the list? Okay, so this is where we get into conspiracy internet, because I don't know how much of this is true, but Meek Mill tweeted, why are all these CEOs stepping down?
Yeah, and Meek Mill is
Also tied up
involved.
in this.
And yeah, he is. It has been rumored for a long time that Meek Mill had to give it to Diddy to become a successful musician. Yes.
Oh, the rumor, and yeah, maybe that's the case. If he had to or if he didn't, that's actually none of my business. But it does just go into this thought that people can't succeed in the music industry out of merit, that they have to do some nefarious stuff like this and compromise their morals or sell their soul, or so they say that term, in order to make it in the music industry.
Right. In like mainstream television music industry.
Yeah.
Because we know some very successful musicians that made it kind of on their own on the internet.
Yeah, but if you want to get into, the power systems,
Yeah.
somehow people think that you have to do these rituals, and you can't tell them they can't.
This seems like that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
And the craziest rumor, well, to finish that, yeah, it seems like WMG executive resigned. That seems confirmed. And the CEO of Nike resigned. That seems confirmed.
Okay, and
all
Kevin
around the
Lyle's
same.
a music exec. And there's a huge list. And I can't confirm all of them are related to this, because there's been other resignations for other conspiracies that the elites are doing, like the board of 23andMe. I don't know how it's related to this.
Yeah,
you
we
know?
can't combine these two things.
But people are online, which is why it's really confusing. It's like, no, guys, that's the lizard people trying to take over.
Yeah, 23andMe just took all of our information, sold it to China, and now the company's not worth anything because you can only use the service once.
Oh, yeah, and plus, maybe or maybe not, they're engineering a disease.
Sure.
It is not what this is about.
Okay, that won't go on YouTube. Very good. That's just for the Patreon.
That is not going on YouTube. But yeah, I don't want to overlap CEO resignations here. We're talking about Diddy and his scandals.
Yes. But to bring it back to kind of the idea of it being a, why is this not a cult? I guess it is, like you said, because it is so driven by self-interest from the people. It's not tied to a doctrine. It is a cult of personality around a person, but that influence extends only as far as his resources go.
Yeah, well, the doctrine is get mine, get the bag. And you know what? That doctrine has won. Over the course of Diddy's career, he has actually managed to instill that in the average American. So if this somehow goes back to this is a cult somehow, I don't know. I don't know all the behind the scenes. It wasn't really listed in the indictment. They said it was a criminal enterprise, and they said he's trafficking people across state lines, and he's giving them narcotics, that he has unregistered weapons and all this stuff, but it doesn't say that he's a cult leader trying to take over their minds.
Right.
But if we find out later that it is, then he would have been very successful because he convinced the entire generation that it's all about them. This goes back to the cult of self.
Yes.
And this is where
it all goes back to the cult of self.
the cult of self, which overlaps with Satanism.
Interesting.
Now, I'm going to be the craziest ever. Let's say there's someone pulling the strings behind the scenes for both Diddy and Epstein, and then they're both cut off. Does this go on for other people as well?
Like, will there be another? Well, what's interesting with Diddy is it, like you said, it lends some credence to this idea that to make it as a successful entertainment person on the level of, you're a household name, you have to be involved in some shady.
You have to sell your soul.
You have to basically be part of the ritual, sell your soul, whatever.
Yeah.
It is interesting that, like, the internet has sort of disrupted that a bit, right? Like, even to, as of yesterday, the caliber of powerful person that would be at one of these parties, like, they control the mainstream distribution channels.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm sure if you look at the list when it comes out of who's all implicated in all of this, that it's basically anybody who can put you on television, anybody who can get you in the rotation on the, 4 radio stations that we have left.
Yeah, we're owned by 6 companies, own all the radio stations now.
It's insane. So they've consolidated power, and they have these gatekeepers that will allow you in if you give them compromising material on yourself.
And that's been the rumor for a long time. And now it's been kind of, I wouldn't say proven, but supported, affirmed, because we're looking at the names here and we're talking about, and this is just people who have been implicated. I'm not saying that they are guilty, but we're talking about Jay-Z and Beyonce,